As human beings, we are a pretty awesome species. As a civilization, we have invented the wheel, kept historical records to guide present and future generations, landed spaceships on the moon, unlocked the atom, and cracked the genetic code, as well as revolutionized the face of all we do with computers that bring us into the global internet. When you stop to think about it, our list of triumphs is long and very impressive. Yet at the same time, we massacre each other in war, wreak havoc on the environment, discriminate against racial and ethnic groups different from our own, and deceive ourselves into believing in alien abductions. This unit, we will be exploring what is it about the way humans think that leads us to both rational and irrational. This exploration will encompass how we solve difficult problems, evaluate possible solutions, decision-making processes, and the errors that we are predisposed to make along the way. We will also be discussing the role that language plays in the way we think. What is language, and is it the capacity that most clearly separates humans from other animal species? Over the course of the next few days, we will analyze some of the basic processes of thought and language, then address the question of how they are related. But first, let's categorize thinking within the study of psychology before we begin. So in Unit 10.1, we will be solely focusing on thinking. It's also important to note that thinking and language is a part of the larger component of the AP exam, which is cognition, mental processing. Thinking is the mental activity involved in understanding, processing, and communicating information. Now, with that definition, what perspective of psychology would you categorize thinking? As we said earlier, and as it says on the screen, it is cognitive psychology. So thinking is a branch of cognitive psychology, as it is one of the many mental processes such as memory, communication, and knowing. Now let's move on to our analysis of human thinking by beginning our discussion about concepts, the basic building blocks of abstract thought and language. So concepts like freedom, sports, animals, education, furniture, war, peace, music, heroes, triangles, happiness. Each of those words represents a distinct concept. A concept is a mental grouping of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. As we saw in the last chapter, our long-term storage of knowledge can be pictured as a complex but orderly network of semantic encoding, or concepts. So when one concept in the network is activated, other closely related concepts come to mind, or are primed, if you remember that concept. Remember from last unit on memory, priming? Some concepts are more closely related than others. We know that it takes longer to reveal connections between concepts that are distant than between those that are closely related. So, for example, if I ask you to give me an animal, name an animal, similar to a donkey, you might immediately say horse. Why? Because the concepts for those two animals are very closely connected in terms of neurological connections in the brain. Secondly, some members of a category are perceived to be more typical of that category than others. When people are asked to list properties of different concepts, the most typical members, called prototypes, have more of these properties than others. Now that we have discussed the basics of formulating thoughts, let's discuss how we utilize thinking to solve problems. Problem solving is not just applicable to an AP exam. Problem solving can be involved when you're deciding what to eat for breakfast. Problem solving can be involved when deciding which route to take to work or school. All right, so once a problem is represented, whether it's through words, static images, or mental models, we try out possible solutions and test to see if they work. If the problem is solved, life goes on. If not, if the problem is not solved, we return to the proverbial drawing board to come up with the new ideas. There are many different ways to find solutions, but there are four basic problem-solving processes: trial and error, algorithms, heuristics, and insight. So first, trial and error is the simplest problem-solving strategy there is, and it's often very effective. Edward Thorndike in 1898 studied animal intelligence by putting cats in a puzzle box, placing food outside a door, and timing how long it took for them to figure out how to escape. At first, the cats tried various ineffective behaviors. They tried reaching with their paws, but the food was too far away. They scratched at the bars, but that didn't work either. They pushed at the ceiling, but that didn't work either. Then they would literally stumble upon the solution, which was to step on a lever that opened the door, and repeat that solution whenever they were in the box. The cats solved the problem by using trial and error. As you can imagine, this aimless hit-or-miss approach is not the most efficient way to proceed, yet it is usually our first response. If possible, however, it's better to take a more systematic, planned approach to problem solving. An algorithm is a step-by-step procedure that is guaranteed, eventually, to produce a solution. When you were taught in school how to solve two-digit addition problems or long division, you learned an algorithm. An alternative is to use heuristics. These are mental shortcuts or rules of thumb which may or may not lead to the correct solution. The I before E heuristic for spelling, IE words, is a good example, but I doesn't always come before E when there's a C present, for example. If algorithms are guaranteed to produce solutions, why not use them all the time? The reason is that algorithms are not always available, and sometimes they take too much time to be practical. A difficulty with heuristics is that they don't always work. We shouldn't rely on them all the time because they don't guarantee the solution, but they are more time efficient and more practical. When people struggle with a problem, they usually try to monitor their progress to evaluate whether they're closing in on a solution. But have you ever puzzled over something, felt as if you were stumped, and then come to the answer abruptly out of the blue, as if a light bulb flashed inside your head? Aha! If so, then you have experienced something, a problem solving called insight, a process in which the solution pops into mind all of a sudden, and in which the problem solver doesn't realize the solution is coming and cannot describe what he or she was thinking at the time. But we're going to talk about insight more next unit. Let's focus more on algorithms and heuristics. To appreciate the difference between algorithms and heuristics, consider the following anagram problem. Unscramble the letters to make a word. Now, there are two strategies to unscrambling the letters. One strategy is to use an algorithm. This would require you to consider all possible combinations by systematically varying the letters in each position. By the way, there are over 900,000 possible combinations with these letters, so have fun considering every single one of those with your algorithm. All right. Eventually, you will get to the correct answer, but it's going to take a long time. The alternative to the algorithm is the heuristic. For example, you could try to eliminate letter combinations, or you could try to highlight combinations that are most familiar. For example, we know that there are very few YY letter combinations in the English language, so we can just eliminate that right off the bat. What other heuristics could you use to unsolve or to unscramble this word?